Have you ever heard of Jeroboam? He was a man who had the chance to be a great leader, but his choices led him down a tragic path. Today, we're going to dive into the fascinating story of the rise and fall of Jeroboam, the first idolatrous king after the division of Israel. If you've ever felt pressured to make difficult decisions or feared the consequences of your choices, you'll identify with the challenges faced by Jeroboam. His story is a powerful lesson in how disobedience and the pursuit of power can lead to ruin, but it also shows us the way to avoid these mistakes. Get ready to discover how Jeroboam's life teaches us the importance of following the right path and making the right choices to achieve true greatness. But before you start, make sure you're already subscribed to this channel. We're always here telling stories and unraveling the mysteries of the Holy Bible. I want you to imagine the story of Jeroboam with me now. He was a very talented and hardworking young man from a simple family. One day, Jeroboam was chosen by God for a great mission, to be the leader of the northern tribes of Israel. This is as if he were the mayor of a very important part of a country. Jeroboam got off to a great start. King Solomon, who was the king of Israel at the time, saw how smart and handy Jeroboam was, so he gave him a very important job, to look after all the workers in the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Everything was going well for Jeroboam. God even made him a promise. If you follow my commandments and do everything right, your family will rule Israel for a long time. That was quite a promise, wasn't it? But then things began to change. When King Solomon died, his son Rehoboam became the new king. Rehoboam wasn't as smart as his father and made some bad decisions. He made the people work very hard and pay a lot of taxes. The people were very upset about this. Jeroboam took advantage of this situation to help the northern tribes free themselves. They no longer wanted to be ruled by Rehoboam, so they made Jeroboam their king. And so it was that Jeroboam became king of the northern tribes of Israel. He was now the head of a large part of the country. But instead of continuing to follow God's teachings, Jeroboam began to do the wrong things. He became afraid that his people would return to Jerusalem to worship God in the temple. With this in mind, he built 2 golden calves and said to the people, "These are the gods who brought you out of Egypt." This was a very bad thing, because God had said not to make idols. In addition, Jeroboam chose people from any tribe to be priests instead of choosing the Levites, who were the ones appointed by God for this function. He even invented new religious festivals to further alienate the people from God's teachings. In the end, Jeroboam's wrong choices led to many problems. God sent prophets to warn him, but he didn't listen. Because of Jeroboam's idolatry and disobedience, God decided to wipe out his family. After many years, all of Jeroboam's descendants were wiped out, and his royal line came to an end. The story of Jeroboam shows us how important it is to follow the right path and obey God. When we make the wrong choices, we not only harm ourselves, but we can also cause problems for others. For a better understanding of Jeroboam's mistakes, we need to understand how the division of the kingdom of Israel came about. Before this split, the kingdom was ruled by Solomon. He was very wise, but towards the end of his reign, he began to levy too many taxes and force the people to work too hard. This made the people very tired and angry. When Solomon died, his son Rehoboam became the new king. People expected him to be fairer and to reduce taxes and work. Jeroboam, a respected leader of the northern tribes, returned from Egypt and, together with other leaders, went to talk to Rehoboam. Jeroboam and the leaders said to Rehoboam, "Please be kinder and reduce the taxes and hard labor that your father has imposed on us. If you do that, we'll be loyal to you." Rehoboam asked for 3 days to think and talk with his advisors. The older advisors who had helped his father said, "If you are good to the people, they will be your faithful servants forever." But Rehoboam also asked the young men who had grown up with him for advice, and they said, "You must be even tougher than your father. Show them who's boss." Rehoboam decided to follow the young men's advice. When he told the people that he would increase taxes and work even more, the northern tribes became very angry. Then they decided that they no longer wanted to be ruled by Rehoboam. The people split up and chose Jeroboam as their king. This is how the kingdom of Israel split into 2. The northern kingdom, with Jeroboam as king, and the southern kingdom with Rehoboam ruling only Judah and Benjamin. Jeroboam returned north and began to rule over the 10 tribes that had chosen him. He established his capital in Shechem and fortified several cities to protect his kingdom. This division caused many problems. The 2 kingdoms, the northern and southern, didn't get along, and there was a lot of tension between them. Rehoboam even thought about fighting to reconquer the north, but God sent a prophet to tell them that they shouldn't fight against their own brothers. So a major war was avoided, although small conflicts continued to occur. In the end, the actions of Rehoboam and Jeroboam showed how a leader's decisions can affect many people. After Jeroboam became king and became the leader of the northern tribes of Israel, he had a great responsibility in his hands. But he made some very bad choices that changed everything for the worse. Among these choices was idolatry to other gods. Jeroboam was afraid that the people of his kingdom would want to go back to Jerusalem, which was in the southern kingdom, to worship God in the temple. He thought that if the people did this, they might stop following him and go back to following King Rehoboam. So Jeroboam had the wrong idea. He had 2 golden calves made and said to the people, "You no longer need to go to Jerusalem to worship God. Here are the gods who brought you out of Egypt." This was a big mistake, because God had clearly said that he didn't want people to worship idols or images. But Jeroboam didn't stop there. He built 2 new places of worship, one in Bethel and one in Dan, so that the people wouldn't have to travel all the way to Jerusalem. In addition, he chose people from any tribe to be priests, instead of choosing the Levites, who were the only ones God had allowed to be priests. Jeroboam's actions made God angry. Worshipping idols is against the Lord's commandments, and Jeroboam was leading all the people to make this mistake. One day, God sent a prophet to speak to Jeroboam and warn him about what was to come. The prophet said that because of Jeroboam's disobedience and the idolatry he had introduced, the house of Jeroboam would be destroyed. This meant that Jeroboam's entire family would suffer, and he would no longer rule Israel. And that's exactly what happened. Jeroboam's descendants were exterminated and his kingdom fell into disgrace. All this because Jeroboam chose not to follow God's commandments and tried to do things his own way. This story teaches us the importance of obeying God and not getting carried away by wrong ideas, even if they seem good at first. Whenever we think about doing something, we should remember the consequences of our actions and choose the right path, following God's teachings. Jeroboam had the chance to be a great king, but his bad choices brought him and the people of Israel much sorrow. Before we go any further, leave a like on this video so that YouTube understands that this content is relevant to you and will recommend more videos from our channel. Now let's talk in more detail about God's prophecy and judgment, about Jeroboam's choices and worship of other gods. He wouldn't listen to the warnings and continued to worship idols, which made God very sad and angry. So God decided to send prophets to warn Jeroboam about the consequences of his actions. As has already been said, one day, while Jeroboam was offering sacrifices on the altar he himself had built, a prophet sent by God arrived. This prophet came from Judah, and he had a very important message. He looked at the altar and said, "This altar is going to be destroyed. A descendant of David called Josiah is going to be born and sacrifice the false priests you have placed here." Jeroboam was furious with the prophet and stretched out his hand to have him arrested. But at the same moment, Jeroboam's hand dried up and he could no longer move it. He was terrified and asked the prophet to pray and ask God to heal his hand. The prophet prayed, and God, showing his mercy, healed Jeroboam's hand. Even after this great sign, Jeroboam didn't change his attitude. He continued to lead the people into idolatry. Then God sent another prophet, Ahijah, to speak to Jeroboam's wife. Ahijah was very old and almost blind, but God revealed to him that Jeroboam's wife was coming in disguise to ask for help because their son was ill. Ahijah said to her, "Go back home, because as soon as you enter the city, your son will die. What's more, God is going to destroy Jeroboam's entire family because of his sins and because he led Israel into sin." Ahijah's prophecy was clear and harsh. He explained that God was very disappointed with Jeroboam for not following his commandments and for making the people worship idols. Ahijah said that all the men of Jeroboam's house would be wiped out and that their descendants would be swept away like dung. And everything happened exactly as the prophet said. Jeroboam's son died as soon as his wife returned to the city. And after some time, another man called Baasha plotted against Nadab, Jeroboam's son, who who was on the throne, and killed all of Jeroboam's family, fulfilling the prophecy of Ahijah. After unpacking the story of King Jeroboam in this video, we should learn some important lessons from this biblical narrative. Jeroboam started out as a promising young man, full of abilities and with a great future ahead of him. He had everything to be an incredible king, but he made choices that changed everything. Firstly, Jeroboam teaches us that obeying God is essential. In the beginning, God gave him a great opportunity to lead the northern tribes of Israel and promised to bless him if he followed his commandments. But Jeroboam chose to ignore these commandments and went his own way, worshiping idols and leading the people to do the same. This shows that when we receive wise advice, especially from God, we should follow it wholeheartedly. Another important lesson is the consequences of our actions. Jeroboam thought he could do whatever he wanted without facing any problems, but every action has a reaction. His disobedience brought a lot of suffering, not just for him, but for his whole family and the people of Israel. It's like a YouTuber who, if they don't follow the rules and create good, honest content, can lose followers and face many problems. So always think carefully about your choices. Jeroboam also shows us that influence is powerful. As a leader, he had a responsibility to lead his people along the right path, but instead, he led them into idolatry and disobedience to God. This reminds us that when we have followers or people who look up to us, as with a YouTuber, we should use our influence for good, inspiring others to do the right thing and be better people. Finally, the story of Jeroboam teaches us about the importance of humility and change. Even after seeing God's signs, Jeroboam didn't want to change his ways. He continued to do the wrong things, and this led to his downfall. We must be humble and always be ready to correct our mistakes. If someone gives us advice or if we realize that we're on the wrong path, it's important to change and do the right thing in order to have a better and happier life. These lessons show us that, like Jeroboam, we all have choices to make and responsibilities to fulfill. If we make wise decisions, obey God, and use our influence in a positive way, we can have an incredible impact on our lives and the lives of everyone around us. Take advantage of this moment and leave your comment below saying what you can do today in your life that is different from the choices King Jeroboam made. Take advantage of this and subscribe to our channel and activate the bell so that you can ensure that stories like this are brought to you.